Angela Warren stood in the middle of the courtroom, the mop still in her yellow-gloved hand as the entire room fell silent. "I will defend him," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. Her calloused fingers tightened around the mop handle as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. At the defense table, Wayne Sterling, the tech billionaire whose own lawyers had just abandoned him, lifted his head and looked at her with utter disbelief. None of them knew that this simple moment would mark the beginning of the unraveling of one of the darkest conspiracies in American corporate history. Before we dive into this moving story of justice, courage, and rebirth, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that anyone, whether a powerful billionaire or a quiet janitor, deserves to be treated fairly under the law, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories about silent heroes like Angela deserve to be told, and you won't want to miss them. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments section. Please subscribe to Beyond Hope and Belief, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's see what drove a forgotten legal genius to rise up against the very system that once crushed her life. But before everything began to shift, what do you think made Angela, someone who had lost nearly everything, step out of the shadows at that exact moment? The autumn sunlight of New York filtered through the tall windows of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, casting streaks of light across the marble floor that Angela Warren had just finished cleaning. 5 in the morning, just like every day for the past 12 years, she was already here. A 38-year-old woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and warm brown eyes that had seen too much sacrifice, dressed in a navy blue maintenance uniform with ANGLA embroidered on the chest pocket. The tiny studio apartment in the Bronx was still pitch black when she left at 3:45 a.m. The room had only a Murphy bed, a small hot plate, and a bare wall adorned with just 2 photos. One of her mother before the cancer diagnosis, smiling on a sunny day when the world still made sense. Beside it was a picture of her younger brother Marcus at his high school graduation, now 25, and finally working his first real job, the job Angela's cleaning salary had made possible. Angela didn't turn on the lights when she left home. Winter electricity bills were high, and with a salary of $2,400 a month, every penny mattered. Breakfast was just black coffee and a thermos and toast she'd packed the night before. Food she supplemented with whatever the courthouse basement cafeteria was throwing out from the day before, a small privilege for maintenance staff. That morning, as she pushed her yellow cleaning cart down the third-floor hallway, Angela paused in front of courtroom 7, the place where the biggest cases in New York unfolded. And today, one of the most significant legal battles in the city's history was set to begin. The trial of Wayne Sterling, the tech billionaire worth $8.4 billion. She didn't hear about the case from the news. She didn't own a TV. But from the nights she spent cleaning that very courtroom, she had seen the polished lawyers, heard the things they said when they believed no one was listening. To them, the janitor was just furniture, invisible, not worth noticing. But Angela hadn't always been invisible. Before we dive into this moving story of justice, courage, and rebirth, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe that anyone, whether a powerful billionaire or a quiet janitor, deserves to be treated fairly under the law, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories about silent heroes like Angela deserve to be told, and you won't want to miss them. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments section. Please subscribe to Beyond Hope and Belief, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. 12 years ago, she had been one of the rising stars at Columbia Law School. She had a brilliant mind, a partial scholarship, and a reputation for solving complex legal puzzles that left her professors impressed. Top 5% of her class. Recruiters from Manhattan's most prestigious firms were already circling, making promises about corner offices and partnership tracks. Until everything collapsed. Her mother's cancer diagnosis came during her second year. Stage 4. Aggressive. Expensive. The medical bills piled up faster than insurance could cover them. Her teenage brother Marcus, only 13 at the time, needed someone to raise him, someone to make sure he didn't fall through the cracks while their mother fought a losing battle in a hospital bed. The choice was simple, even if it was devastating: her dreams or her family. She chose family. Angela withdrew from Columbia 3 months before graduation. She took the first job she could find that offered immediate pay, mopping floors in the very courthouse where she had once imagined arguing landmark cases. She had managed to pass the bar exam just before withdrawing, squeezing in the test between hospital visits, so technically her license was still valid. But what good was a license without a degree to back it up? Without a firm willing to hire someone who spent her days cleaning toilets? She pushed the memories away. That was the past. Now she mopped floors, polished benches, emptied trash, an honest job that paid the rent and allowed her to help Marcus finish college, even though he always tried to refuse her money. For 12 years she had convinced herself it was enough, it was noble, it was right. But deep down, every time she cleaned a courtroom after a trial, every time she emptied a trash can full of legal briefs, every time a lawyer walked past her without seeing her, a part of her died a little more. She hadn't stopped being brilliant, she had just stopped being visible. As Angela was finishing her morning cleaning in courtroom 7, her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor: "Warren, courtroom 7 needs second cleaning. VIP trial today. Inspection at 8:45. Angela exhaled slowly. VIP meant pressure, scrutiny, and endless opportunities to be yelled at for the smallest smudge on a window. But as always, she didn't complain. She never complained. By 9:00 a.m., the courtroom was packed. Reporters pressed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery. Lawyers in expensive suits adjusted their ties and straightened their notes. Camera operators jockeyed for position. The air hummed with anticipation and the rapid-fire clicking of laptop keyboards. At the defense table, Wayne Sterling sat alone. He was 38, with sharp features that the media loved to photograph. But today those features were drawn with exhaustion. His custom Tom Ford suit was impeccable, but his hunched shoulders and tightly clasped hands told a different story. His piercing blue eyes, usually so confident in board meetings and press conferences, now looked clouded with something Angela recognized instantly: betrayal. Next to him were 6 empty chairs, the seats reserved for his legal team from Caldwell, Price and Associates, the most expensive law firm in New York, charging $8,000 an hour. But they weren't coming. Angela, still in the back corner of the courtroom preparing to slip out before the proceedings began, checked the wall clock. 9:15 a.m. The trial was scheduled to start in exactly 15 minutes. Wayne kept checking his phone, calling, texting. Each time he set the phone down, his jaw tightened another notch, his face grew a shade paler. Angela had seen this pattern before in other cases, though never this blatant, never this public. His lawyers had abandoned him. "All rise," the court officer announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Judge Caroline Martinez entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had witnessed every courtroom trick imaginable. Stern, fair, uncompromising. She settled into her chair, surveyed the courtroom, and her gaze locked onto those 6 conspicuously empty seats beside Wayne Sterling. Her expression shifted from neutral to concerned. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Where is your legal representation?" Wayne stood slowly, trying to maintain the composure that had built his empire, but his voice betrayed him. "I don't know, Your Honor. They were here yesterday during jury selection. I've been trying to reach them all morning, but no one is answering my calls or texts." Prosecutor Catherine Morris rose from the prosecution table like a predator scenting blood. A thin, triumphant smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Your Honor," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "it appears quite clear that the defense has been abandoned by counsel. Given the defendant's complete inability to provide adequate legal representation, the prosecution moves for an immediate default judgment." The courtroom erupted. Reporters typed frantically. Camera shutters clicked like machine guns. Spectators leaned forward in their seats. Judge Martinez raised her hand for silence, but her expression was grave. She looked at Wayne Sterling with something that might have been pity. "Mr. Sterling, if you have no legal representation, this court cannot proceed. The law requires that you have counsel, and without it, I have no choice but to. I will defend him." The voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the chaos like a bell through fog. Every head in the courtroom turned as one. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even Judge Martinez's gavel, raised to strike, froze in midair. Angela Warren stood in the side aisle next to her cleaning cart, yellow rubber gloves still on her hands, mop leaning against the cart. The morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows illuminated her navy blue uniform, catching on the white stitching of her name tag, Angela. For 12 years, she had been invisible in this courthouse. For 12 years, no one had truly looked at her. Now every single person in courtroom 7 was starring. Nervous laughter rippled through the gallery, uncertain, mocking, disbelieving. A janitor wanted to play lawyer. But Angela didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She carefully set down her spray bottle, pulled off her yellow gloves with slow, deliberate movements, and began walking forward down the center aisle. It wasn't the shuffle of a maintenance worker trying to stay invisible and unnoticed. It was the confident stride of someone who belonged, someone who knew exactly what she was doing. 12 years of pushing a mop couldn't erase muscle memory, couldn't erase the posture of someone who had once been destined for greatness. Judge Martinez's eyebrows rose sharply. "And who exactly are you?" Angela stopped at the bar that separated the gallery from the well of the courtroom. Her voice was steady, clear, burning away 12 years of invisibility in a single moment. "My name is Angela Warren, Your Honor. I would like to represent Mr. Sterling." The nervous laughter grew louder, more confident now. Someone in the back actually guffawed. Prosecutor Catherine Morris stood with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Your Honor, this is absolutely absurd. A janitor cannot possibly—" "I am a member of the New York Bar Association," Angela interrupted, her voice cutting through the prosecutor's objection like a scalpel. Her gaze never left Judge Martinez. "I completed 2.5 years at Columbia Law School before personal circumstances required me to withdraw. I passed the New York State Bar examination on my first attempt 12 years ago." The laughter died instantly. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Angela reached into the pocket of her maintenance uniform and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, she extracted a card, creased from being carried for over a decade, faded around the edges, but unmistakably official. Her bar license. She walked forward and handed it to the bailiff, who examined it with widening eyes before passing it up to Judge Martinez. The judge studied the card for a long moment. Her expression shifted from skepticism to surprise, and finally to something that might have been grudging respect. "Ms. Warren," Judge Martinez said slowly, weighing each word, "this license is indeed valid. However, it's been 12 years since you've practiced law. Do you truly believe you are qualified to handle a case of this magnitude and complexity?" Angela's voice didn't waver, not even slightly. "Your Honor, I have spent 12 years in this courthouse. I have cleaned every courtroom, every judge's chambers, every lawyer's office in this building. I have observed thousands of trials from opening statements to closing arguments. I have listened to legal strategies discussed by attorneys who believed I wasn't listening, who thought I was invisible." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom, past the shocked reporters, the stunned spectators, the prosecutor's furious face, finally landing on the jury box. "I've read discarded legal briefs, forgotten case files, confidential memos thrown in trash cans by lawyers too arrogant to realize that someone might be paying attention. I may not have practiced in 12 years, Your Honor, but I have never, not for a single day, stopped learning. I have never stopped studying the law." She turned slightly, her gaze finding Wayne Sterling's face. He was staring at her with an expression of complete disbelief, but also something else, something that looked almost like hope. "And this man," Angela continued, her voice gaining strength, "deserves to be defended, not by lawyers who take his money and abandon him when it matters most, but by someone who actually believes that justice isn't something you can buy, someone who believes that the truth matters more than a price tag." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Wayne Sterling stood slowly. His hands were no longer shaking. His voice, when he spoke, was firm, certain. For the first time that morning, it was the voice of the man who had built a tech empire from nothing. "Your Honor," he said clearly, "I accept Ms. Warren as my legal counsel." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The prosecutor objected loudly, demanding that this mockery be stopped immediately. Judge Martinez raised her gavel and brought it down 3 times, sharp cracks that demanded order. "Quiet." The room fell silent again. Judge Martinez looked between Wayne Sterling and Angela Warren, the abandoned billionaire and the invisible janitor, and for perhaps the first time in 30 years on the bench, she seemed genuinely uncertain about what to do. Finally she spoke. "Ms. Warren, you will have 15 minutes to confer with your client. After that, we proceed with jury selection and opening statements." Her gaze sharpened into something steely. "And I strongly suggest you find yourself a proper suit before we begin. This is still a court of law, and you will dress accordingly." Angela nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." "And Ms. Warren," Judge Martinez added, her voice softer now, almost concerned, "are you absolutely certain about this? Once we begin, there's no turning back. This trial will be brutal, and you'll be facing one of the most aggressive prosecutors in the state. If you fail—" "I won't fail," Angela said quietly. "I can't afford to." Angela walked toward the defense table, only to be immediately blocked by a security guard. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "Only attorneys are permitted past the bar." Angela held out her bar license without a word. The guard examined it, looked up at Judge Martinez for confirmation. The judge gave a single, sharp nod. The guard stepped aside, awkward and uncertain, as if the world had just tilted on its axis. When Angela sat down in one of the empty chairs beside Wayne Sterling, she felt the weight of every gaze in the courtroom pressing down on her shoulders. Hundreds of eyes, dozens of cameras, the collective judgment of everyone who had walked past her for 12 years without seeing her. But she looked only at Wayne. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face like words into stone, the betrayal that sat heavy in his eyes, the fear he was trying so desperately to hide beneath that expensive suit and practiced composure. She recognized that look. She'd seen it in her mirror 12 years ago. "Something is very wrong here," Angela whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "This isn't just about your lawyers abandoning you at the last minute. This is orchestrated. Someone planned this. Wayne leaned toward her, his voice barely audible. How do you know that? Because I've cleaned this courthouse for 12 years, Angela said quietly. I've observed thousands of cases. I've watched how lawyers move, how they think, how conspiracies develop. And this, she gestured subtly to the 6 empty chairs, this isn't natural. Law firms don't abandon billionaire clients on the morning of trial. Not unless someone got to them. Someone powerful enough to make a firm charging $8,000 an hour walk away from guaranteed money. Who would do that? That's what we need to find out, Angela said. But first, you need to tell me everything about this case. Every detail, every person involved, every document, every email, every conversation. We have 15 minutes and I need to know it all. Wayne stared at her for a long moment, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time despite having passed her in the courthouse hallways a dozen times over the years. He didn't see a janitor anymore. He saw intelligence burning in her eyes, determination in the set of her jaw, the kind of fire that money couldn't buy. And for the first time since his lawyers had abandoned him, Wayne Sterling felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the hollow kind that came from throwing money at problems. Real hope. The kind that comes from meeting someone who genuinely gives a damn about the truth. All right, he said, his voice steadier now. Where do we start? Angela pulled a small, worn notebook from her uniform pocket, the same one she'd been carrying for 12 years, filled with legal observations, case notes, precedents she'd memorized while mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Start at the very beginning, she said, and don't leave anything out, not a single detail. 15 minutes. That's all they had to prepare for a battle that would determine whether a billionaire lost everything he'd built, and whether a janitor could reclaim the dreams she'd sacrificed 12 years ago. But here's what no one in that packed courtroom understood yet. Angela didn't need 15 minutes to prepare for this case. She'd been preparing for 12 years. Every overheard conversation between lawyers who thought she was invisible, every discarded legal brief she'd read while emptying trash cans, every trial strategy she'd absorbed while scrubbing floors. Every single moment of those 12 years had been building toward this. She had been creating a vast mental library of legal knowledge, piece by piece, case by case, detail by detail. And now she was finally going to use it. Because the world was about to learn a truth it should have known all along. Brilliance doesn't disappear just because you're holding a mop instead of a briefcase. Justice doesn't belong to those who can afford the most expensive lawyers. It belongs to those who are willing to fight for it. Validation isn't given by a title on a business card or a diploma on a wall. It's earned through courage, the courage to speak up when everyone else is silent. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who seems the most invisible is the one who sees absolutely everything. Stay with us. Because what happens next will prove that heroes can emerge from the most unexpected places. Even from behind a mop and a maintenance cart. Angela's fight for Wayne Sterling isn't just about one trial or one man's freedom. It's about every person who was ever told they weren't good enough. Every dream that was deferred or sacrificed. Every brilliant mind that was overlooked because of the uniform they wore or the job they held. This is the story of how the invisible became undeniable. This is the story of Angela Warren. 3 weeks before Wayne Sterling's trial, Angela pushed her cleaning cart down the empty third-floor hallway at 5:47 a.m., her mind working through a problem that had nothing to do with the streaks on the marble floor. The Henderson case. She'd been following it for months, a medical malpractice suit in courtroom 5. Yesterday, she'd emptied the plaintiff's attorney's trash and found a crumpled motion to exclude evidence. The attorney had cited Daubert v. Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals to challenge the defense's expert witness, but they'd missed something crucial. The Supreme Court's 1993 ruling applied to federal courts, not state courts. New York followed the Fry Standard, established in 1923. The motion would fail, and the plaintiff would lose a winnable case because their $400 an hour attorney didn't know basic evidentiary law. Angela's hand moved the mop in practice circles while her mind raced through the precedents. People v. Wesley, 1988. Parker v. Mobil Oil Corp., 1993. She could see the case law like pages in a book, could trace the logical chain that would save the Henderson family's case if only someone would listen. But no one would listen to a janitor. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Sis, don't send money this month. I got a raise. $47,500 now, finally pulling my weight." Angela smiled, though her eyes stung with something that wasn't cleaning solution. $47,500. Her little brother, the boy she'd raised while their mother withered away in a hospital bed, was making more in a year than she made in 2. He'd graduated with a degree in computer engineering, the degree her cleaning job had paid for. She texted back, "So proud of you, Mom would be too." His response came immediately, "She'd be proud of you. You sacrificed everything." Angela pocketed the phone and kept mopping, the motion automatic now. The Henderson family would lose their case tomorrow because their lawyer had made a mistake Angela had spotted in 30 seconds while emptying a trash can. Wayne Sterling's trial started in 3 weeks, and something about the pretrial motions she'd overheard felt wrong, orchestrated, calculated, like pieces moving on a chessboard toward an inevitable checkmate. She pushed the cart forward, invisible in her Navy uniform, brilliant mind wasted on dirty floors. For now, the moment came at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Angela was in the back corner of courtroom 7, replacing the trash bag near the bailiff station, when she saw the lead attorney from Caldwell, Price and Associates glance at his phone. His face went pale. He showed the screen to the attorney beside him, then to the others. Like dominoes falling, each one checked their phones, and each face drained of color in the same way. They stood as one unit, synchronized, rehearsed, mechanical. "Your Honor," the lead attorney said, his voice tight, "the defense requests a brief recess. An urgent matter has arisen that requires immediate attention." Judge Martinez frowned. "Counselor, we're about to begin jury." "It cannot wait, Your Honor. We apologize for the inconvenience." They walked out, all 6 of them. Their $3,000 briefcases, their imported leather portfolios, their meticulously organized case files, everything left behind on the defense table like abandoned cargo. Wayne Sterling sat frozen, his phone already at his ear. Calling, no answer, calling again, nothing. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Catherine Morris didn't bother hiding her smile. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey stumble into a trap. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled, watching Wayne's growing panic with undisguised satisfaction. Angela's hand tightened on the trash bag. This wasn't right. Lawyers didn't abandon billionaire clients 5 minutes before trial, not 6 of them, not simultaneously, not unless someone had made them an offer they couldn't refuse or a threat they couldn't ignore. "Stay invisible," her survival instinct whispered. "This isn't your fight. You have Marcus to think about. You have rent to pay. You have a life built on staying unseen and unnoticed." But Wayne Sterling's face, the betrayal, the confusion, the dawning realization that he was alone, looked exactly like her own reflection 12 years ago when she'd withdrawn from Columbia, when the system had forced her to choose between her dreams and her family, and then blamed her for making the only choice she could. The judge's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mr. Sterling, if you have no representation." Angela's feet were moving before her brain caught up. The mop clattered to the floor. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "I will defend him." Judge Martinez's gavel came down like a gunshot. 15 minutes, not a second more. Angela sat across from Wayne in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. He stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, part gratitude, part desperation, part barely concealed doubt. "Look," he said carefully, "I appreciate what you did out there, really, but this is a corporate espionage case worth billions. My lawyers spent 3 months preparing and he caught himself, they were the best in New York." "They were also bought," Angela said flatly, "or threatened. Either way, they're gone and you're here and we have 13 minutes left." Wayne ran his hand through his hair. "You cleaned floors at Columbia Law. You never even graduated." "I passed the bar 12 years ago." "The law doesn't change that fast," Angela said. "And I've spent 12 years watching trials in this building. Your case is prosecution theory is built on the argument that you accessed Sterling Global's proprietary technology while still serving as CEO, then stole it when the board forced you out. They're claiming you violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and the Economic Espionage Act." Wayne blinked. "How do you know?" "I emptied your lawyer's trash for 2 months. I read every draft memo, every discarded strategy note." She leaned forward. "But here's what your $8,000 an hour attorneys missed. The CFAA requires unauthorized access. You were CEO. You authorized yourself. And under Van Buren v. United States, the Supreme Court ruled in 2021 that exceeding authorized access doesn't apply to someone who has legitimate access rights, even if they use that access for an improper purpose." Wayne's expression shifted. The doubt flickered, replaced by something sharper: interest. "The prosecution knows this," Angela continued, her voice gaining momentum. "That's why they're relying on the espionage angle. But the Economic Espionage Act requires proof that you intended to benefit a foreign power or stole trade secrets for economic advantage. You can't steal from yourself, and Sterling Global was your company. The technology was developed under your direction. The board says I had no right to it after they terminated me." "The board terminated you illegally. Hostile takeover without shareholder approval. I found the proxy statements in Julian Vane's office trash." Angela met his eyes. "The fire you're seeing, it never went out. I've just been invisible." Wayne Sterling smiled for the first time that morning. "Not anymore." The prosecution's first witness was Dr. Raymond Chen, Sterling Global's chief technology officer. Tall, distinguished, with wire-rimmed glasses and the confident bearing of someone who'd testified in dozens of cases. He'd spent 40 minutes on direct examination explaining how Wayne had stolen proprietary algorithms. When Angela stood for cross-examination, she bumped the podium. Her notes scattered. She scrambled to gather them, aware of every smirk in the gallery, every skeptical glance from the jury. Catherine Morris barely suppressed a smile. But when Angela looked up, her voice was steady. "Dr. Chen, you testified that Mr. Sterling accessed the secure server on March 15th and downloaded files containing proprietary code. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you stated that this access occurred at 11:47 p.m. after business hours, suggesting suspicious activity." "That's correct." "Dr. Chen, were you in the office that night?" He hesitated. "No." "But I was." Angela pulled a photo from her folder. "This is your office, taken by building security at 11:52 p.m. on March 15th. See that coffee cup on your desk, the one with the Stanford logo?" Chen's face paled slightly. "I emptied your trash that night at 11:30. Your office was dark. That coffee cup wasn't there." Angela produced another photo. "But here's the same cup, same desk in a photo time-stamped 2:15 a.m. March 16th. You came back to the office in the middle of the night." I often work late." "You came back after the server logs show Mr. Sterling's access, and you brought that coffee cup from home. The same cup that appears in the background of the fabricated evidence photo the prosecution submitted as Exhibit 12. Angela placed both images side by side. The metadata on Exhibit 12 shows it was taken at 2:47 a.m., March 16th, 4 hours after Mr. Sterling's supposed suspicious access, and then backdated. The courtroom erupted. "You staged this photo to make legitimate access look criminal," Angela continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "How do I know? Because I'm the one who found that coffee cup in your office trash the next morning. It still had your lip balm on the rim, the cherry kind you use, which I noticed because it left a stain on tissues I've been emptying from your trash for 3 years." Judge Martinez leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, I'm going to ask you this once. Did you fabricate this evidence?" Chen's silence was answer enough. Wayne's penthouse office at 11:43 p.m. was nothing like Angela had imagined. She'd expected cold steel and glass, the sterile perfection of wealth. Instead, she found mismatched furniture, a wall covered in handwritten notes, and a small kitchen area with a coffee maker that had seen better days. "Sorry about the mess," Wayne said, clearing papers from the conference table. "I do my real thinking here, not in the corporate suite." Angela set down her thrift store briefcase, $4.99, purchased that afternoon during the lunch recess. "This is where you built Sterling Global." "Started in a garage, moved here when I could afford rent." He smiled ruefully. "Kept the office even after the company went public. The board hated it, said it wasn't professional for a CEO." They worked in comfortable silence for an hour, reviewing witness lists and evidence logs. Angela made notes in her worn notebook. Wayne typed on a laptop that looked 10 years old. "Why that computer?" Angela asked. "You literally invented next-generation processors." "This one's mine. Built it myself at 16. He ran his hand over the scratched case. "Reminds me who I was before the board, before the billions, before people started treating me like an ATM machine instead of a person." Angela understood that. Being invisible for years, then suddenly visible for the wrong reasons. "Why'd you leave Columbia?" Wayne asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. Angela had deflected it 100 times over 12 years. But here, in this cluttered office at midnight, with a man who'd just been betrayed by everyone he'd trusted, the truth felt easier. "My mom got cancer, stage 4. My brother was 13. Someone had to," she stopped, the old wound still tender. "The law school gave me a choice, full-time student or caregiver, not both, so I chose Marcus. Chose my mother's last 6 months, chose to be there when it mattered." Wayne was quiet for a moment. "My parents died when I was 12, car accident, foster care until I aged out at 18. I built Sterling Global because I never wanted to be that powerless again." He met her eyes. "But money didn't stop them from taking it all away." "We'll get it back," Angela said. "We," Wayne repeated, and something in his smile made Angela's heart beat differently. Not the desperate gratitude of a client, but something warmer, recognition. Two people who'd been discarded by the world, now fighting back together. Julian Vane caught Angela in the courthouse basement parking garage 3 days into the trial. She'd stayed late reviewing documents, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead as his footsteps echoed behind her. "Ms. Warren, a moment." She turned. Vane stood in his $5,000 suit, perfectly tailored, perfectly menacing. 2 men in dark suits flanked him, corporate security, not courthouse staff. "Mr. Vane, you're not supposed to approach opposing counsel without." "Let's skip the theatrics." He pulled out a checkbook. "You're a smart woman who's been cleaning toilets for 12 years. I'm offering you a way out. $500,000. All you have to do is make a few small mistakes. Forget to object at the right moments. Misfile a motion or two. Sterling loses, you retire comfortably." Angela's hand moved to her phone in her pocket, finger sliding to the voice recorder app she'd opened the moment she heard his footsteps. The garage's security cameras had blind spots. She'd been emptying trash in the security office for years and knew exactly where they were. But that also meant she'd known where to stand to record without video evidence. "That's bribery," she said clearly, projecting her voice. "Call it a consulting fee." Vane's smile was cold. "Or we can discuss your brother Marcus. Works at Tech Venture Solutions, doesn't he? Recently promoted. Such a promising career. Would be a shame if certain information about falsified credentials reached his employer." Angela's blood turned to ice. "Marcus has never falsified anything." "Doesn't matter, the accusation alone would destroy him. Corporate HR doesn't wait for proof." Vane stepped closer. "You're out of your depth, Ms. Warren. This is a $4 billion hostile takeover. You think we'd let a janitor playing lawyer stop us? Take the money, walk away, or we'll destroy you both." Angela's mind raced. Marcus was everything she'd sacrificed for. His career, his future, everything she'd mopped floors to build. But she thought of Wayne's face when his lawyers abandoned him. The Henderson family losing their case because no one fought hard enough. 12 years of being invisible while injustice played out around her. "No," she said quietly. Vane's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." "I've made plenty of those. This isn't one of them." As he walked away, Angela pressed stop on the recording. The file uploaded automatically to her encrypted cloud storage, another trick she'd learned from Marcus. They'd threatened the wrong person's brother. On the 8th day of trial, Angela walked to the evidence table carrying a manila folder that had cost her 3 sleepless nights to assemble. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit 47. Judge Martinez nodded. "Proceed." Angela opened the folder, revealing what looked like a patchwork quilt made of paper, hundreds of tiny shredded strips, meticulously taped back together on a clear backing sheet. The jury leaned forward, curiosity overtaking skepticism. This document was recovered from the trash bin in Julian Vane's office on March 10th, 5 days before Mr. Sterling allegedly stole the technology. Angela's voice was steady, clinical. "I found it while performing my regular cleaning duties. It had been run through a crosscut shredder. It took me 47 hours to reconstruct." Catherine Morris shot to her feet. "Objection, this is a confidential internal memo," Angela continued, "from Mr. Vane to the Sterling Global Board of Directors, outlining a plan to transfer the quantum processing technology to an offshore subsidiary, Cortec Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands, while Mr. Sterling was still CEO without his knowledge or authorization." The courtroom erupted. Angela held up the reconstructed document. The memo explicitly states, "Sterling must remain unaware of the transfer until after termination. Once removed from the company, we can claim he stole what we've already moved." It's dated March 10th. The technology transfer occurred March 12th through 14th. Mr. Sterling's termination was March 15th. His so-called theft was actually him discovering what had been stolen from him. Judge Martinez examined the document, her expression darkening with each line. "Ms. Warren, how can you verify this is authentic?" "The paper matches Sterling Global's internal letterhead, watermark visible under UV light. The digital signature embedded in the footer contains metadata showing it was created on Julian Vane's computer." And Angela pulled out another page. "This is the server log showing the technology transfer to Cortec Holdings. Timestamps match perfectly. The board didn't just frame Mr. Sterling. They documented their own crime and threw it away, assuming no one would ever piece it back together." She looked at Vane, who'd gone white. They assumed wrong, because the person they thought was invisible was actually the only one paying attention. Wayne stared at Angela with something beyond gratitude, with wonder, with respect, with the dawning realization that the woman who'd saved him had been saving evidence for months, invisible but vigilant. Justice, Angela had learned, often came from unexpected places, sometimes from a trash can, sometimes from the hands of someone the world had overlooked. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. When they filed back into the courtroom, Angela's hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Wayne sat beside her, his shoulder touching hers, a silent anchor in the storm. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Martinez asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman, a middle-aged accountant who'd been taking meticulous notes throughout the trial, stood. "On all counts of corporate espionage, we find the defendant not guilty. On all counts of computer fraud, we find the defendant not guilty. On all counts of theft of trade secrets, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushed for exits. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. Wayne's hand found Angela's, squeezing once hard. Judge Martinez's gavel cracked 3 times. "Order! There are additional matters to address." The room fell silent. "Mr. Vane, please stand." Julian Vane rose slowly, his face ashen. He knew what was coming. "Based on the evidence presented by Ms. Warren, including the reconstructed memo and the recording of your attempted bribery, I am ordering your immediate arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and solicitation of bribery." Judge Martinez nodded to the bailiffs. "Bailiff, take him into custody." 2 officers moved forward. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as they handcuffed Julian Vane, reading him his rights. His $5,000 suit suddenly looked like a costume, his power evaporating with each click of the metal cuffs. As they led him past the defense table, Vane's eyes met Angela's. She didn't gloat, didn't smile, just held his gaze with the steady confidence of someone who'd been underestimated her entire life and had finally proven why that was a mistake. Judge Martinez turned to Angela. "Ms. Warren, in 30 years on this bench, I have never witnessed such thorough, meticulous investigation. Your attention to detail, the kind most attorneys overlook, quite literally saved an innocent man and exposed a criminal conspiracy. The court commends you." Angela stood, voice steady. "Thank you, Your Honor. Justice doesn't require expensive suits or prestigious degrees. It requires someone willing to see the truth, even when everyone else is looking away." Wayne Sterling stood beside her, a free man at last. "Especially when everyone else is looking away," he added quietly. And in that moment, Angela Warren, former janitor, interrupted law student Invisible Woman, became undeniable. 6 months later, Angela stood in the sunlight streaming through Columbia Law School's chapel windows, wearing a graduation gown instead of a navy blue jumpsuit. The fabric felt foreign after 12 years of maintenance uniforms, but the weight of it, the symbol of everything she'd sacrificed and finally reclaimed, felt exactly right. Marcus sat in the 3rd row, grinning so wide his face might split. Next to him, in a simple gray suit that cost less than his usual wardrobe, sat Wayne Sterling. He'd insisted on coming, despite the media circus that followed him everywhere since the trial. Dean Richardson called her name, Angela Marie Warren, Juris Doctor. The applause started before she reached the stage, not polite academic applause but thunderous, standing, roof-shaking applause. Her story had spread beyond the courtroom. The janitor who'd saved a billionaire, the invisible woman who'd seen everything. But that wasn't why she was crying as she accepted her diploma. She was crying because her mother should have been here. Because 12 years ago, she'd walked away from this moment to hold her mother's hand during chemo, to raise Marcus, to choose love over ambition. And she'd do it again, every single time. The sacrifice hadn't been wrong, it had just been incomplete, until now. After the ceremony, Wayne found her outside, away from the cameras and congratulations. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a letter of offer from Sterling Legal Defense Fund, a new nonprofit Wayne had established to provide legal representation for people who couldn't afford it. Position: Director of Litigation. Salary: more than she'd made in 12 years of mopping floors. "You're giving me a job?" Angela asked. I'm giving you a purpose that matches your talent." And he pulled out another envelope. "This is a full scholarship fund for Marcus to pursue his master's degree. Not from you, from me. So you can stop sacrificing everything for everyone else and start building something for yourself." Angela's hands trembled. "Wayne, I can't." "You can. You did." He smiled, and it wasn't the smile of a billionaire or a client. It was the smile of someone who understood what it meant to be invisible and then seen. Second chances don't come from titles, Angela. They come from people who refuse to stay silent when it matters. You taught me that. Angela looked at the diploma in her hand, the job offer, the scholarship for Marcus. She thought about the yellow gloves she'd finally thrown away, the mop she'd never push again. "I will defend them," she said quietly. "I know you will," Wayne replied. "That's why I'm standing beside you." And finally, Angela Warren was visible for all the right reasons. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please do well to like, share, comment, and most especially subscribe. And turn on your notification for my next upload.